Thank you so much, and thank you all for being here. This is awesome. I cannot believe how many people actually showed up for what is essentially a discussion on management theory and science. So this is fantastic. Are happy workers more productive? I think that's a really good question, and I'd like to get a sense of where you all stand. So let's start with this question. How many of you would agree with the following statement? Yes, happy workers are indeed more productive. Please keep your hand up. Take a look around. Take a look around. That looks like around 95%. Would you agree, Lars? Yeah. 95% of you agree with that. I hate that. Okay? I hate and resent that because I am used to being the rebel. Okay? I'm used to being the person who speaks truth to power, the person who goes up against conventional wisdom, who tells company leaders that they need to focus on the happiness of their people. I'm used to sticking it to the man. And here you are, all of you, agreeing with me. I hate that. It's a very uncomfortable position for me to suddenly be defending the status quo, to be defending what everybody else already thinks. It's not really a part of who I normally am. And I would argue this is also very unusual. This is very unusual. I would say this could probably only happen in Scandinavia. In Denmark, in Sweden, in Norway, those are probably the only countries in the world where you could get a group of people together like you guys and 95% already agree with this statement. In the rest of the world, I'm still the rebel. Yes! And of course I agree. I am absolutely convinced that happy workers are indeed more productive, that you do a better job when you like what you do. However, I am not a researcher. Okay, I would say I'm more of a popularizer. I speak about this, I write about this, but I do no original research in this field. Of course, what I have done is look at all the research that is out there, and I've actually talked to a lot of the people doing this research. I know a lot of those people, a lot of the leading researchers in this area. And here's what they have to say. Ed Diener is probably the grand old man of happiness research, and he looks at both happiness in life and happiness at work. I've never met Ed, but I've met his son Robert, Robert Biswas Diener, great guy. And he tells me that his dad, Ed, he's the kind of guy who, when he's at home in the evening and he really wants to relax, he'll sit down in a comfortable chair, kick up his feet, and read analytical research science papers. That's how he relaxes when he really wants to have a good time. He's been doing happiness research, Ed Diener, for over 30 years. And he says this: in the workplace, we know that happiness causes more productive and more creative workers. So that's his take on it, looking at the science that he and others have done. Another guy is Kerry Cooper. He's from the UK. He's from Manchester University, where he's been researching this stuff for a long, long time now. And he says there is a significant amount of research that organizations with high personal well-being will get better results. And he wrote an excellent book about this called Well-Being, Productivity, and Happiness at Work, together with his business partner, Ivan Robertson. So that's just a couple of quotes from some of the leading researchers in this field. How do we know that this is so? Well, we know this from the research. We know this from the evidence. And I care very, very deeply about the evidence. I don't believe that I could be out there saying that happiness at work is good for you, saying that happy workers are more productive, if there were not evidence to support this conclusion. And I actually believe, I care deeply about truth, and I care deeply about truth that you can prove using evidence, using science. And I'm convinced that the science supports this conclusion, that happiness at work makes us more productive. But that's easy to say. So what I'd like to do is actually give you some examples. I can't go through all of the science. That's impossible. There's so much of it. But I can show you 4 studies that I believe illuminate this from different viewpoints and that I believe are really, really interesting. This one is absolutely fascinating. I found this recently. Daniel Scroy from the University of Warwick. And he wanted to know, again, are happy workers more productive? So here's what he did. He went to an elite UK university and he did some experiments on the students there. And what he did was that he would get them to volunteer for this study, actually pay them. And they would do math exercises like this, adding 5 two-digit numbers, okay? They were not allowed to use calculators, but they were allowed to use pen and paper, okay? And they had to do as many of these as they could in 10 minutes, and he'd record how many they attempted and how many they got right. What he would also do was that at the beginning, when this person came in, they would be randomly assigned to either the study group or the control group. And in the treated group, the study group, he would show them a short comedy clip before they did the actual exercise, okay? A short comedy clip that makes them laugh, puts them in a good mood. And the control group, they would see just a regular normal video, some computer graphics moving around, a video of the same length. And then the question is, okay, does that do anything to people? Just a short comedy clip that makes you laugh. Does that make you better at adding two-digit numbers? For those of you sitting there thinking, oh my God, what is the result? It's 232. Okay. You can now relax. I used a calculator. And here are the results. Here are the results. Let's look at additions over on the right. And what you can see is there's the untreated group, they just saw the normal video, and there's the treated group, they saw the funny video, the comedy video. And you can see just from that they actually did 10% more correct calculations compared to the untreated group. So even as something as banal as adding numbers, being in a good mood, being happy actually makes you more able to do that. They also, this way over on the right-hand side is how many attempts they did. And you can see that the happy people actually did more attempts. So they also worked harder at this than the untreated people. So that's nice. But then they're wondering, that's just a comedy video. What about, real happiness or unhappiness? Does that affect people? This is just, something we do to them. We show them this stupid little comedy video. So what they really wanted to do was study, what if those people have been affected recently by something that made them either happy or unhappy? What if they had recently, something really good happened to them and they were now really happy, or something really bad happened to them and they were really unhappy? What would that do to the subjects? And this is where they run into a problem. And this is where I found the most awesome sentence I have ever seen in any research paper ever. And this is it. For ethical reasons, it is not feasible in experiments to introduce huge changes in the happiness of people's lives. That is just awesome. We'd like to study what happens when people become really unhappy, but we can't do that to them. So here's what they could do. They could find students that had recently suffered a loss, either a sick person in the family or a loss in the family, what they called a bad life event. And then basically do the same experiment on those people. And here's what they found. In this case, they did not show them any comedy videos. These people just came in and did the math problems for 10 minutes. And you can see there are two groups, no bad life event and bad life event. And again, the group that has suffered a recent bad life event are less happy and complete fewer math problems correctly. Okay? So this is just one example to show that indeed, even on something as simple as adding numbers on with a pen and paper, happy people actually do this more. They do more problems and do them more correctly than those who are unhappy. And there are similar studies in any number of areas. If you look at the science out there from psychology, sociology, and neurology, we know from any number of studies that happy people are not only more productive, they're also more creative. They have more and better ideas than people who are in a bad mood. There's a fascinating study by a lady called Teresa Amabile, who's a professor at Harvard, and she found that if you're in a good mood on Monday, you have more and better ideas at work on Monday and on Tuesday, even if you're in a bad mood on Tuesday. It seems like being happy has a long-term cognitive effect on your mind, makes your mind broader and makes you more able to think new thoughts and come up with new ideas. So happy people are more productive. They are braver, they're more resilient in the face of setbacks, they They sell more, they give better customer service, they're more open, more empathetic, more generous. They did a study where they measured how happy people are, and then they asked them for donations. And the happier people are, the more they gave on average. So on any number of traits, on abilities, happy people outperform unhappy people. Now, you could argue, yeah, that's all well and good. This is in the lab, okay? And that's actually a valid complaint. Not all of these findings that you find in the lab can actually be transferred to the workplace. So how do we know that this is actually also valid in the workplace? Well, I'll give you an example. This is from, I mentioned Kjerulf Cooper before. This is from his book, Well-Being, Productivity, and Happiness at Work. And this is just one study they have in that book. And I apologize for the bad picture quality here. But this is a study of 750 employees from a workplace in northern England, from the same workplace, okay? And what they did was they asked these people to self-report their personal well-being. You know, how well are you? How do you feel at work? Their happiness at work, basically. And they got some measurements for their productivity. And as you can see, there is a clear correlation, a correlation factor of 0.41. So there is a clear connection between feeling well and doing well. Kjerulf Cooper sums it up like this: an increase of 1 point on the personal well-being scale, which is a scale from 1 to 5, is associated with an increase in productivity of 8.8%. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's a quite significant effect. So yes, this does transfer into the workplace. But that's just one workplace, okay? Maybe that's just true for that one workplace in Northern England. Well, let's look at something that looked at a lot of workplaces. The Gallup studies, they work with engagement. And there's this paper that looked at their data, well-being in the workplace and its relationship to business outcomes, by those three guys from 2003. And this study is massive. It is huge, okay? Almost 8,000 business units, that's departments, teams, project teams, and almost 200,000 people who have responded to this study. And here's what they found. Here's what they found. They have found that employee well-being correlates with lower absenteeism, so people get sick less often, lower employee turnover, so people stay in the workplace longer, higher productivity, higher customer satisfaction, higher sales, and higher profits. The problem with this data is proving causation, okay? Are people becoming happier because all of this is going well, or is the fact that they are happy making all of this go well? And they're beginning to look at the data in that way, and it looks as if the causation goes both ways, but it is stronger from well-being to all of these results. So that's looking at a lot of workplaces. And finally, the final study I want to mention is what about stock price? You know, the share price of the company. That's all a lot of companies care about these days. And interestingly, the stock price it's a very cynical measure of a company's worth, but it does sort of comprise everything that the market knows about this company. Everything we know about their sales, their structure, their customers, their expenses, their strategy, everything we know about that sort of gets rolled into this one measure, which is the stock price. And here's an interesting graph. This is, these graphs show two things. First of all, the green and the yellow graph at the bottom, those are sort of the stock price of the American stock market as a whole. That's the Russell 3000 and the Standard & Poor's 500 index, okay? And they're sort of an indication of how the American stock market is doing in general, okay? And you can clearly see the financial crisis in 2008, where all the stocks drop off. This is from 1997 to 2012. Now, the red graph above that is the share price for the 100 best workplaces in the US, according to the Great Place to Work Fortune 100 Best Workplaces list. And as you can see, even on the stock price, the happy workplaces clearly outperform the unhappy ones. And in this case, In this case, they actually have determined the causation. Because what they have done is that they have looked at happiness and stock price at year 1 and compared that to happiness and stock price at year 2 to find out what the relationship is. And what they found was that happiness at year 1 predicts stock price at year 2, the year after, better than the other way around, than stock price at year 1 predicts happiness the year after. So I want to make this perfectly clear. There's no doubt that there is a circular relationship here, and that being productive makes you happy. Being part of a successful workplace feels awesome, and it certainly feels better than being in a failing workplace, right? There's no doubt, but there is definitely also a link from happiness to productivity. And looking at the data, it certainly seems like that link is stronger. Best bet is about twice as strong. But I want to make clear this is very, very new research. So those are the 4 studies that I wanted to mention. You know what really annoys me? What really bugs me? Something I hate? Ryanair. And I know I'm not alone, but I hate Ryanair for a very specific reason. I hate Ryanair because they're an incredibly unhappy workplace and incredibly successful. And that bugs me so badly. Honestly, I kind of want Ryanair to fail because they have no right to be so miserable and still so successful. They're the most profitable airline in Europe, way more profitable than EasyJet, Norwegian, and a lot of the others. And they're miserable. I think their strategy is to treat their customers and their employees really, really badly. I tried this today. I went on Google and I typed in the search box, typed in Ryanair is, and then you get the Google autocomplete. Ryanair is the worst airline. Ryanair is crap. Ryanair, is it safe? Ryanair is dangerous. And yet they're incredibly profitable. And I think this is worth keeping in mind. Okay, we are talking average relationships here. It's perfectly possible to run a really unhappy business that is still very profitable. It's also absolutely possible to run a very happy workplace that completely fails and goes bankrupt. We're talking on average here, okay? We're talking across, hundreds of people, hundreds of workplaces. And when you look at this on average, that's when you see the patterns. And I can't help thinking, okay, what if you took Ryanair's business model, which is insanely good and insanely successful, what if you took that and added happiness? How successful would that be? Or at least if you took away some of the misery. I think that would be fantastic. Thank you. So just a few caveats, a few warnings. This is not an open and shut case. I'm not here saying that we know everything there is to know about the relationship between productivity and happiness. I have 3 major questions that I would love to know more about that, as far as I know, nobody has yet looked into. Question 1, is this different across industries? I could easily imagine that, for instance, in hospitality, hotels and restaurants, having happy staff is crucial to your success and crucial to your bottom line. We don't know. Maybe this matters more in knowledge companies than it does in a factory. We don't know. I'd love to find out. Maybe this is different across individual people. Maybe some people have a huge effect, a huge bonus, a huge benefit from being happy at work and are much more productive when they're happy. And other people don't really care. And they can be productive if they're happy or unhappy. We don't know. Again, we've just looked at the averages. This would be fascinating to find out. And maybe there are different personality types that have different benefits from being happy at work. And finally, this is the question I would love to know the answer to, is what should we measure? Because there are studies out there, and I've referenced a few of them, that measure happiness, engagement, positive effect, job satisfaction, personal well-being, and so on. Which of these is the most relevant? Which of these causes happiness at work the most? We don't know. I'd love to know that. It certainly seems like, for instance, personal well-being is much more reliable than job satisfaction. And finally, my final point here is, and I want to make this perfectly clear, I think happiness is awesome, okay? But I want to make this clear, we don't go to work to be happy. We go to work. It's just that when we are happy, we do a much better job.
Great.
Thank you.
Let's give Alexander a hand. Thank you, Alex, for a very concise, precise introduction to our subject today.
My pleasure.
Yes, we have now 10 minutes for questions to Alex. So specific questions to this presentation, please come up with them so that we really have a sense of what is Alex's opinion before we go into a dialogue. Yes, there's one from the back.
Just curious, have any of these studies' results taken into consideration different cultures?
Yeah, the question is, are there any considerations of culture in this that you can tell us about?
Not that I've seen, no. The studies that do look at differences in culture have been in life satisfaction or life happiness and not in workplace happiness. So no, I haven't seen any. That would be a fascinating thing to find out.
More questions? Yes, let's hear it.
Is the interest in making people more happy before they go to work by changing their circumstances in their private life, or are you interested in changing the way the firm is working, and then that will cause more happy employees, doing two things at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see the most? Where do you have to do a change?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let me just, for the video, we are rephrasing the question. So the question is, should you take into consideration people's happiness in their private lives, or is it worth the effort and something that companies should address or work on, take care of?
I think most of the focus should be on happiness in the workplace, and what can you do in the workplace that makes people happy, or what can you stop doing that's making people unhappy. That's where most of the focus needs to be. That being said, there is no doubt that what happens to you at home also affects you at work. If you're going through hard times at home, if you're in the middle of a divorce, if someone in your family is sick, that will actually affect your performance at work and your happiness at work. And I think a workplace can actually do a lot in those circumstances. And I don't think as a workplace you can just ignore how people feel at home, because it has such a huge effect on them at work. There's an ethical consideration here as well, because you can't just butt into people's private lives. I don't think you can force them to stop smoking. I don't think you can force them to lose weight or eat healthy or get a divorce if they're unhappy with their spouse. That would be absolutely horrible. But you definitely, as a workplace, you can offer assistance if people are facing difficulties in their private lives. And if you do that, that can actually be something really positive that helps people through troubled times.
And be worth the investment, I suppose, is your consideration.
I wouldn't, yes, but I wouldn't even want to look at it in those terms. I would just look at it as that's just the right thing to do. That's just the human thing to do. Say, if there's anything I as a workplace can do, can I give you time off to be with your sick mother? Can I give you advice on how to deal with this legal situation? Can I help you in these circumstances? I wouldn't even think of it in terms of paying or not paying. I'd think of it in terms of right or wrong.
Okay.
I think we had a question.
Yeah, we got a question over here.
Did you have any studies on cross-sectorial factors regarding management, how the leaders manage, or the staff have influence in how to either do manualized work, or do they have a personal impact and influence how to carry out the work? That was
Yeah.
And the other, what about the recruiting process and what kind of personalities you recruit to certain kind of companies?
Okay, the question is, let me try to rephrase that. So the question is, do you have studies into the recruitment process? I could imagine selecting for happiness is perhaps one of the issues here.
Yeah,
and also an issue of involvement and influence on your job regarding happiness as well. Is that correctly?
Yeah. Studies on recruiting are far between and hard to come by, but I did see one this week that said that companies suck at recruiting. They think they have this whole process in play and they think they know how to do it well. They're completely wrong. And it turns out that there's very little correlation between how well people are rated in the interview process, the recruitment process, and how well they actually perform on the job afterwards. So that's certainly one thing. The other question, please help me with that. The other question was...
That was regarding influence at work.
Oh, yeah. Yes, that's something I didn't have time to talk about at all here in this presentation, is what actually makes us happy at work. But if you look at the research, there is definitely autonomy and a level of freedom at work is definitely one of the things that makes us happy. Oh yeah, that shows up in a lot of studies.
In contrast to manualized work where you don't have to use your mind.
Well, not so much in contrast to manual labor, but more in contrast to a work situation where we experience no freedom, where there are very strict limitations on you. You have no say, no input, no autonomy at all. If you can give people some influence on how they work, when they work, where they work, who they work with, that definitely tends to make us happier.
Okay, thanks. And a question here?
You mentioned the Gallup study, and that study distinguishes between happiness and engagement.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, so the question is there a difference between happiness at work and engagement, especially in the Gallup study, but perhaps also in general? You have the term happiness at work, but it's some places it's satisfaction at work, engagement, motivation at work. Do you see some different differences?
Yeah, oh yeah, those are all different terms, and they're all interrelated, absolutely. And this is where I got to be really careful, because Gallup has done awesome work, and I don't want to diss them, but I still think that happiness is more important than engagement. And I think, and again, this is where I'd love to see some research to back up my opinion, so I will make this very clear. This is what I think is going on, is that that happiness is actually more profound, it's more fundamental to who we are, because it's an emotional state. Whereas it's basically happiness is a catch-all for feeling good, right? For being in a positive emotional state, for what psychologists call positive affect. And it's such a fundamental part of who we are and what we are as people. And I think that has a more profound effect on us, on everything, including our productivity, than engagement, which is one specific positive mindset, positive state you can be in. That's the way I see it. And by the way, engagement can be positive or negative. If I put a gun to your head and say, do this or else, you will be really engaged in the task. Probably won't be very happy. Probably won't even be very productive if I tell you to, add 2-digit numbers with a gun to your head. But I want to make this very clear. This is my personal opinion. I do not have the research to support this, and I hope somebody out there will do it.
Great. One more question here.
Yeah. I saw 3 examples of correlation or no correlation in happiness and productivity.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one with the English factory, where you saw clear correlation.
Yeah.
And then you have the Ryanair example where there was no correlation.
Yeah.
And then you have the big study with where you say that here you can see there's a correlation.
Yeah.
But isn't that just because we are working with large numbers and a non-correlation and a clear correlation becomes some correlation?
Well, could you please rephrase that?
So you've got to help me here. So the question is, we are dealing with a lot of large numbers, so these correlation studies, are they really significant? Couldn't it just be because we have so large amount of studies and numbers? We can find any result that we're looking for.
Yeah. And wasn't it Mark Twain who said there are 3 kinds of lies? There are lies, damn lies, and statistics. That's where and again, I'm not a statistician. Okay, that's where I have to trust the authors and the peer reviewers of these papers to point out and say, yes, you can trust this data. These are the conclusions you can make with 95% confidence. These conclusions are maybe this is what we think, but this is not supported by the evidence or whatever. What you're saying is an absolute valid concern, but I do not have the statistical knowledge to actually gauge if this is what's going on. It's certainly not what they say in the papers. and we'll make sure you get these slides, and you'll have all the sources. You can go direct to the actual papers, and maybe you can look at it and tell me if that's what's going on.
Great. I think that's about the time we've set aside for getting an impression of what Alex stands for, and I would have loved to have more time to hear about what creates happiness at work. Of course,
that's next time.
Exactly. So that's something you can talk to us a lot about, I know.